Okay, I just did that to make sure that we were good to go, so I could hear it. So I think we should be fine.
Sounds good. I can hear it on both.
Okay, I just did that to make sure that we were good to go, so I could hear it. So I think we should be fine.
Sounds good. I can hear it on both.
Okay, I just did that to make sure that we were good to go, so I could hear it. So I think we should be fine.
Sounds good. I can hear it on both.
Okay, I just did that to make sure that we were good to go, so I could hear it. So I think we should be fine.
Sounds good. I can hear it on both.
Hey, Peter.
Hey, Craig, how are you?
Good.
Okay, I just did that to make sure that we were good to go, so I could hear it. So I think we should be fine.
Sounds good. I can hear it on both.
I'm not sure what this looping video is about, but
Hey, Peter.
hey, Craig, how are you?
Good.
Okay,
Can you hear me, Craig?
I just did that to make sure that we were good to go, so I could hear it.
Yeah, Jeannie, I got an echo.
Sounds good. I can hear it on both.
I'm not sure what this looping video is about, but
Hey, Peter.
hey, Craig, how are you?
Good.
Okay,
Can you hear me, Craig?
I just did that to make sure that we were good to go, so I could hear it.
Yeah, Jeannie, I got an echo.
Sounds good. I can hear it on both.
I'm not sure what this looping video is about, but
Hey, Peter.
Okay, guys, I think I muted everything in my office. Can everyone still, anybody here still hear the echoing?
No, that's better. That was weird. It's like all I was hearing was a video deal that you had the music, and then it kept saying when I said hi to Peter, and I'd hear like you and Sandra say something. It's like it was just repeating.
Yeah, sorry about that. I don't quite know where it was coming from. It's the same kind of echo that I was having trouble with last week. So hopefully I got this shut down here.
But yeah, I hear you fine just talking like that.
Okay, I think we are we are broadcasting live on YouTube. We are live here on the webinar, so we should be good to go here, I think. Okay, I'm going to share my screen and start well, here, I'll give it just a couple of minutes and then we'll start the video playing. Is there anything else that we need to handle on our side of things before we get going?
Yeah, not that I can think of. I mean, this is my first go, so
Okay.
it doesn't. We got Emily on. I think Stacy's supposed to be on.
Stacy is in the attendee thing and I keep promoting him to panelist and he's not popping on. Has anybody heard from Stacy? Okay.
He's calling me right now. Hey, Stacy.
Peter, did you get my email about the questions?
Yeah, I just sent a response. I've got them incorporated into the slide deck.
Awesome. Thank you. Sorry, I just saw your response. I was having trouble getting things going here just a little bit. So
And you're seeing my slides, the correct screen.
yes, we can see them.
Okay.
Yep, looks good. I just checked the YouTube feed and it looks like everything is going fine on that side of things. So we should be in good shape. Okay, I see Wyatt's got his hand up. Wyatt, do you have a question? I just gave you the ability to unmute yourself if you have a question here real quick. Okay, thanks everybody for joining us for today's CropTalk webinar. We're going to switch gears here real quick. Stacy, you're ready to start sharing your screen and giving our welcome sessions if you would like.
Okay.
So the CropTalk webinar series is really focused for crop production in Northwest and North Central Kansas. And we started this series a year ago when we were unable to get everybody together. And so we've kind of continued having this opportunity for webinars for everybody to get some information, because we know everybody can't make it to in-person meetings and get ready to go in that respect. So we appreciate you guys joining us here on the webinar series. So this week, we're going to be with Dr. Peter Tomlinson. Peter is going to be giving us a presentation on manure in our fertility programs. And then Stacy, I still see a blue screen, not the PowerPoint presentation. And then next week on Valentine's Day, actually, we'll be learning about soil fertility management, site specific, and how that really dovetails in with precision ag. And so that presenter will be Dr. Lucas Haig. So a couple of different presentations this week and next week focused on soil fertility. Actually, the week after that, we're also focused on soil fertility with Dr. Dorvar Ruiz-Diaz. And so really with the fertilizer prices that we are seeing, this is part of the reason that we're spending so much time focused on soil fertility. Stacy, do you want me to share the slides for you?
I guess you're going to have to. It's not wanting to come up.
Okay.
It's showing that I'm trying to share, but
no problem. Is it coming up now?
I think Stacy's going to have to hit stop share.
Sorry, guys.
There you
This
go.
should work a lot smoother. You would think we'd be getting really good at this by now. Okay, here we go, Stacy. I'll pull the slides up and then you can go through them here and do our welcome.
okay. Well, welcome everybody. Appreciate you joining us today. It's a nice, beautiful day, but it looks like we've got quite a few of you on there, and we appreciate y'all joining us. And these CropTalk webinar series, it does kind of take a village. It does actually take, it's surprising, you know, I think all of us have been surprised when we started doing this last year, just how much organizing and everything it takes to get these going. And here's our team of agents that have worked behind the scenes to get these CropTalks up and going. Keith Van Skyke in the Twin Creeks District, Cody Miller, Phillips Rooks District, Sandra Wick, the Post Rock District, Craig Dinkle in the Midway District, myself in the Cottonwood District, Kelsey Wirtz over in the Golden Prairie District, Jeannie Falk Jones, Sunflower District, Emily Benzingdorf over in Thomas County, and Aaron Highland in Rawlins County. And there will be handouts available at the site that you registered at. And you can see that on your screen, Northwest. You can put K-state or be lazy like me and put ksu.edu/events. And that's where you can find the handouts. And then we will probably be asking a few questions through this, and you can use your chat box down here in the bottom as indicated by the red circle, or excuse me, the blue circle, or also you can use the Q&A box, the red circle, and that's for Zoom. And then if you're on YouTube watching, you can put questions or answers into the comment box. And then, and also too, mentioning that, I think our presenter will probably ask a few questions, and you can just put those in that chat or comment box, your answers. And then certified crop advisors, CCAs, you can get credit today. You do need to email Jeannie Falk Jones at the email on the screen right now, please, and let her know that you're on listening, and also give her your CCA number. And then again, at the end, we'll ask you to email Jeannie Falk Jones again, and maybe you ought to go ahead and put your CCA number in again too, just so we have it. and she'll get your name and CCA number down so you can get those credits. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Dr. Peter Tomlinson is going to be speaking this afternoon about manure and your soil fertility program using manure as a nutrient source. Dr. Tomlinson, we appreciate you joining us today, and we'll turn it over to you.
So as Peter is getting his screen shared so that we can see and get rolling here, thanks everybody for, I hear that my email dinging with CCA credits. If you're unsure if yours is coming through, I'll send you an email back at the end to let you know that we got you checked in and checked out of the webinar here today. And with that, I see Peter's slides are up, and I think you are ready to roll, Peter.
All right. Thank you, Jeannie. Good afternoon, everyone. And pleasure to be joining the CropTalk this afternoon. Look forward to spending about the next 30 to 40 minutes visiting about manure and how you can integrate that into your soil fertility program. And so as we think about manure and the broader challenges of managing nutrients in agriculture, it's certainly recognized, and manure certainly can fit this bill of the importance of nutrient applications to increase yield. Manure also does a great job of returning carbon to the soil. But with that comes challenges. If we're not strategic in how we're managing our nutrient applications, we certainly increase the potential risk for nutrient loss. And when those nutrients are lost from their intended point of use, they have the potential to degrade water and air quality, potential to increase gaseous nitrogen loss through ammonia volatilization and nitrous oxide emissions as part of the denitrification pathway. And so one of the real challenges with manure is in terms of what the crop nutrient needs are. Manure is unbalanced, and so while it certainly has an important role to play as a source of fertility, we need to recognize that the nutrient composition of that manure is going to be variable, and it's not going to be in the ratios that plants are going to require. And so, for example, if we apply manure on a nitrogen-based application, we're going to quickly exceed we're going to exceed the crop needs for phosphorus, and that's going to build soil test phosphorus levels and result in having excess phosphorus in our soil that has the potential to be lost and impact water quality. And so, if we think back, 10, 20, 30 years ago, the mindset was, we just need to get rid of manure. We need to dispose of it. And really, there were a lot of, historical applications made based on meeting a crop's nitrogen needs. And so this has resulted in buildup of soil test phosphorus levels in regions of this state and regions of the country where we've got a high influence from animal agriculture. And so where we're looking now at shifting a focus to thinking about manure as a fertility source rather than just a product we need to get rid of, there's some rethinking that and reshaping that needs to be done in how we manage that manure. And so really now it's thinking about, okay, what nutrient does it make sense to make an application recommendation on? And we'll look at this here. And then, how do we, meet the rest of the fertility needs of the given crop? And so, in thinking about manure and any manure app or any fertility application, I always like to keep in mind the 4 R's of nutrient stewardship. So, thinking about what's the right source. Once we've determined that source or sources, as we'll talk about today, what is the right rate? And then when is the right time and place to apply that product or combination of products? And the goal here is, certainly, we want to maintain the productivity of our cropping system. We want to maintain profitability. We want to look at, that we're maintaining a healthy environment and a, a production system that's got resilience to it. And then, as we look at that outer circle of this figure, we can see all of these broader environmental, economic, and social drivers that go to driving the decisions that are made around source, rate, time, and place. So with that comes the first question of the day. And please respond to these questions in the Q&A or the chat of Zoom. But what are the 4 R's of nutrient management? I'll give you a minute or two to enter those.
Peter, you didn't start off with a quick 1-word, 2-word answer, did you?
No, I did not.
Great. So we'll be watching the chat boxes here for them to be coming in. We really appreciate everybody for putting answers in, engaging with us as a presenter. It's hard when you feel like you're not talking to anybody. So part of this interaction is to help you guys feel like you're getting more out of it, and then for helping Peter know where we are in our understanding and help him tool his presentation as we move forward here. So we'll be watching the chat box for answers to come in here.
Well, I'm going to continue on while you continue entering your answers. But the answer would be source, rate, time, and place. And so, as we start to transition here into thinking more about the manure part of the conversation, there's some important conversions that everybody, if there's a slide to take home, I think this is the slide today. Just so as you're doing calculations at home, these are some good conversions to have. So manure testing is certainly a important piece of the puzzle in managing manure correctly. And we'll look at some data here in just a few minutes that shows the wide range of variability that can occur year to year. And even, from one load to another. But the results you receive back from the lab can be in a number of different units. You could receive those results in ppm, parts per million. Solid manure, pounds per ton equals parts per million times 0.002. If you're using a liquid manure, it could be, liquid from a feedlot, a dairy, swine operation. If you want to get that down, converted into pounds per 1,000 gallons, it's going to be parts per million times 0.00834. You may also get your results in terms of a percentage. And so to get from that percent of nutrients to pounds of nutrients per ton, it'd be percent times 20. And if it's a liquid, it would be percent times 83.4. Two other useful conversions would be the conversion factors to convert between a nutrient, well, in terms of potassium or phosphorus and potassium, the conversion between the straight nutrient value in P2O5 or K2O. And so to convert phosphorus to P2O5, it'd be the phosphorus concentration times 2.3 to convert potassium to K2O would be potassium times 1.2. So I always find those conversions helpful to see, particularly as we're thinking about manures and the fact that, depending on what lab you're using, you can receive results in any number of these units. So one of the questions that I frequently get is, or either phrased as a question or a challenge with manure is, it's highly variable. And so had an opportunity dig back through some work that Alan Schlegel had done at Tribune, conducted a 10-year fertility study with different manure sources. And what I've pulled together here is just a look at that variability over the 10 years. And so if we look here, and we'll just talk in terms of tons per acre, in terms of total nitrogen, 29.5 was the average. And that ranged between 16.2 and 40.6 pounds of nitrogen per ton. And then we can look at the organic component, 24.4 as an average, 16 to 30 pounds of nitrogen per ton. And then the inorganic averaged 5.1 and a minimum of 0.2 to a maximum of 10.6. And we see a similar, variability in terms of the phosphorus as well. And so, this is over, this is based on, 10 applications, application each year. And so, certainly the environment of a given year is going to affect that manure's nutrient composition, how it's handled at the animal feeding operation, both in terms of the rations that the animals, that the manure is derived from, as well as, what their storage system that they have in place is all going to affect the nutrients that ultimately arrive at your operation. And, we can see, the same variability in terms of our swine effluent that was utilized in this study. And so, taking the time to get that manure tested helps to maximize the value that you're bringing to your operation if you're incorporating manure. And having a conversation with the animal feeding operation that you're getting manure from. Understanding, is this manure coming out of are all the loads of manure that you're receiving coming out of the same set of pens, and were those animals all fed the same? Was it stockpiled all the same? If you've got some very variable sources even within the same operation, you're going to want to test and manage those different manure sources separately, so that you ultimately get as uniform an application across your operation as possible. We can look at book values, and we'll use these book values here for some calculations. They're good. They give you an idea of the nutrients that you can expect, but all of these have a pretty wide confidence interval around them. And so again, it in getting the maximum value, you really do need to be testing manure and know what you have coming to your operation. One of the challenges, and I've both from graduate school through the time I've been at K-State, I've been involved in helping to maximize or look for opportunities to maximize the utilization of poultry litter coming into Southeast Kansas. And one of the challenges with poultry litter is, the growers in Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Missouri may only test their house every 5 years. And so they may be able to produce a manure test, but again, that may have been from the year prior. So when it's coming to your operation, you're going to want to test that and base your application utilizing those more current test results, because storage is going to affect nitrogen loss. Certainly can impact the availability of the phosphorus and potassium. And so, as we start to think about manure, one of the questions that started coming to my attention is as fertilizer prices started to rise this fall was, what is the value of that manure? How do you put a value on that? And so I did an exercise in early November and looked at NPK prices at that point in time, and this is in the update from that week. But in terms of poultry litter, as we think about what's available in that first year, it's going to be a proportion of the organic N and all of the inorganic nitrogen. And so, that first year value is going to be a little bit lower than what we see when we start to include the residual value for poultry or feedlot manure, swine manure. You're going to want to think about it in terms of this, regardless of the source. But as we think about poultry litter, I consider that a more nutrient dense manure. And so we see that's got a value in the first year of $65 per ton. If we factor in the residual, and so that's the organic nitrogen that mineralizes over time, that value comes up to about $110 per ton. In terms of feedlot manure, first year, $16 per ton. Factoring in that residual, we come up to $28 a ton. And this is just on NP and K values. Those are easy to put a direct value on when we think about all of the micronutrients that are contained in manure and the organic matter that we're returning to our cropping system. Those values, I think, are even higher than what I've shown here. So as you think about manure in your fertility plan, I'm going to work through a couple math exercises here. For corn silage system, it's pretty straightforward, and we can think about this on an annual basis. Utilizing feedlot, which is not as nutrient dense a manure, comparing that versus poultry litter. Well, poultry litter may not be available in Southeast Kansas. There certainly are some operations in Nebraska, and so there may be an opportunity to secure some poultry litter in Northwest Kansas. So just set to do this math, we set up a yield to figure out the nitrogen uptake, and so yield of 20 tons to the acre on that corn silage, and uptake for that about 165 pounds of nitrogen per acre. And so in terms of the manure that's going to need to be applied, 10 tons to the acre on the feedlot and 2.5 tons to the acre on the poultry litter. Now, if we think about that same scenario, but now we're thinking in terms of P2O5, we're going to need 64 pounds of P2O5 per acre to meet the phosphorus needs of that corn silage. And so we're looking at tons per acre, 5.2 on the feedlot and 1.3 on the poultry litter. So if we subtract the application rate for the P-based scenario from the nitrogen-based scenario, you can see that we're over applying just about 5 tons to the acre in the feedlot manure scenario versus and 1.2 tons in the poultry litter scenario. And so, this goes back to thinking about those 4 R's, right source, right rate, that over application from a nitrogen based scenario, that's money being lost to you, or value that's not being captured. And so this is where I recommend that, from a best management standpoint, your manure nutrient, or your manure application rates be based on phosphorus. This also, I think, helps to handle a little bit of risk mitigation for you. One of the challenges I frequently hear is, but we don't know when that nitrogen is going to become available in that manure. And so that's referring to the organic component and when that nitrogen is going to mineralize. So, let's think about that. If we apply on a phosphorus based rate, we're going to need to make up for that shortage in nitrogen. And we can use one of our commercial nitrogen sources to do that, that we have a better understanding of when it's going to be available to the crop, and make sure that we're meeting, that crop's nitrogen needs early on in the cropping year. So what would that nitrogen rate from a commercial fertilizer scenario look like? So we use the phosphorus manure applied. We've got that 5.3 for the feedlot and 1.3 for the poultry litter. That's going to result in 87 to 85 pounds of nitrogen applied. And so that's going to leave us needing about half of our nitrogen needs from another source. And so, that's, you're going to look in this scenario at somewhere between $65 and $67 per acre. That's, again, using that 85 cents per pound in commercial nitrogen that you're going to need to acquire to meet your NP and K needs for that crop. In terms of some other cropping systems and where we come out to in terms of application rates, here we can look at corn soybean rotation, wheat soybean corn, corn on corn scenarios. These are all yield goals for dryland operations. But in these multi-year rotations, we can see here that in terms of our nitrogen needs, utilizing poultry litter is going to meet those nitrogen needs with about a 2-ton application rate. And that's going to meet the needs for both years of that crop rotation. If we think about that in terms of feedlot manure, based on those scenarios earlier, it's a multiplication of, I think it's about 4. And so that would put us right at about that 10 tons to the acre to meet those phosphorus needs utilizing a feedlot manure. In terms of why phosphorus is important and why it presents some environmental challenges, certainly from an agronomic standpoint, phosphorus is very important from a root development, plant cell membrane standpoint, and ultimately is one of the real key drivers in plant energy functions and the movement of energy within the plant system. From an agronomic standpoint, historically, we've thought about phosphorus as one of our immobile nutrients, carried away, absorbed to soil particles during erosion events. As we learn more about phosphorus dynamics in the soil, in no-till systems, we're finding that phosphorus stratification can be a real problem. And when we get really high near surface, and we're talking the top inch to 2 inches of the soil profile, those really high soil test P concentrations that have been observed there, we can actually see some phosphorus losses in runoff water. And a lot of that has to do with, the fact that we've super saturated the soil. And so we've got an opportunity then for water soluble phosphorus to leave our cropping systems. And so when we think about this in the broader environmental standpoint, phosphorus is, frequently the limiting nutrient in many of our freshwater systems. The concentration at which we start to see environmental impacts on scenic waterways is 0.37 parts per million. So it does not take a lot of phosphorus entering a waterway to start, impacting the plant growth and it's fertilizer. It supports aquatic plant and algal growth when it's present. So we'll take a pause here for a minute and ask one of the other questions. From a best management standpoint, what nutrient should be used to calculate a manure application rate? So we'll pause here for a second while you answer that.
Okay, Peter, we're seeing phosphorus all popping up in the chat box. We have nitrogen provided also showing up here. Sandra, do you want to chime in on the YouTube? Are you seeing answers coming across on there?
I'm not seeing any answers right yet because they're like 30 to 40 seconds behind you. So
Oh, sorry. I
That's
forgot
okay.
to switch our streaming speed this morning. That is why. Sorry about that, everybody on YouTube. Sorry, Peter. I made that a little more challenging for you.
Well, the correct answer is phosphorus. From a best management standpoint, our recommendation would be to calculate your manure application rates based on the phosphorus needs of your crop or crop rotation, and then supplement with additional commercial nitrogen to meet those nitrogen needs of the crop or crop rotation. This allows the opportunity, particularly when you're thinking about a crop rotation, to apply that nitrogen that's needed each year, lowering, allowing for a little lower nitrogen application in an individual year compared to if you were trying to meet the nitrogen needs with manure, where you'd have to put out a really high application to meet 2 years. And so just as we kind of wrap up thinking about manure from a fertility standpoint, this is our phosphorus management model for Kansas crop production and manure management. And hopefully my cursor will show up for you. As we think about in the discussion that we're having today is, certainly when you're utilizing manure, soil testing is really important. Understanding what your soil test phosphorus is, whether that's Malic 3, a Bray, E1 level, those two, are pretty comparable. If you're using one of the other soil tests, let me know, and I can get the appropriate conversion value for you. But where you're going to see the most return on your investment in manure is in soils that have a soil test P level of less than 30 parts per million. that's where we expect to see a response to the addition of phosphorus from the manure. If you're, certainly, thinking about build and maintain recommendations, we're going to be in that build phase up to 20 parts per million, then maintenance up to 30. Soil test phosphorus levels is in the high range between 30 and 50 parts per million. But that 30 to 50 parts per million is the nutrient recommendation range. And so this is where to think about managing and utilizing manure. If your soil test P is above 50 parts per million, and I should have had that arrow slid over slightly, but 50 parts per million and above is, at that point, there's not an agronomic need to have phosphorus in your system. And so you're basically, disposing of that manure at that point. And then the question of how to apply it, what the application rate should be, really becomes a risk management question. Certainly at this point, where we see this occurring is on, crop ground associated with feedlots that just need to get rid of that manure. And with that, certainly Kansas NRCS should be involved, or a private company in figuring out what the phosphorus index values are for any given piece of land, and figuring out, from a disposal standpoint, what the application rate should be, whether it's 1 times crop removal or 1.5 times crop removal. The upper limits for Western Kansas, where P application is shut off, it's 200 parts per million. But again, this upper side is disposal. In these times of high fertilizer prices, utilize that manure on ground that has a soil test phosphorus level less than 50 parts per million, and then you'll be gaining economic value from that manure application in your fertility program. Just thinking about manure, best management, some other important things to keep in mind with manure is certainly in proximity to streams, water bodies, having riparian buffer zones is important. These are vegetated areas along the edge of water bodies. Could be grass, could be a combination of grass, trees, and shrubs. Also utilizing vegetative filter strips or buffer strips that provide some separation between the cropland and surface water bodies, help to filter certainly sediment, but the organic materials in manure, the nutrients from leaving the field during a runoff event. Some other good rules of thumb. So in terms of a minimum setback distance to both surface and below ground waters, recommended distance would be 100 feet from perennial streams, wellheads, ponds, or sinkholes. These are any conduits that we can see that manure enter both surface and aquifer water supplies. 50 feet for intermittent streams. And if you have established buffers, we can reduce those distances by 50%. So as we wrap up here, thinking about manure today in your soil fertility program, some key considerations certainly are where are you going to store that manure? And we haven't talked about that a lot, but making sure that you've got good all-weather access, that, at site, the storage locations are away from water bodies, away from residents. This gets to, being the good neighbor. Manure has a particular odor to it. I think of it as the smell of money, but not everybody has that same view of the odor that goes with manure. Understanding your soil type, what is the infiltration capacity of that soil? Are you going to have a chance for those nutrients, particularly on the nitrogen side, to leach away? Are you in an area with sensitive groundwater? And then as we think about, the broader field from an agronomic standpoint, soil testing, in all aspects of soil fertility is important, but I think it's even more important if you're going to start utilizing manure, so that you understand what your soil test phosphorus levels are, and that you can manage your application rates appropriately, so that you keep your soil test P levels at less than 50 parts per million. Certainly observe recommendations around setbacks, and to maximize or minimize the loss of nitrogen and maximize the value of the nitrogen in manure. Incorporation is important. I know that this last point creates heartburn in the no-till community. Not saying that you can't use manure in no-till, but and I'm not saying that you have to incorporate it, but from the standpoint of minimizing the odor after application and maximizing the nutrient retention, incorporation is a tool to do that. And so here we'll ask the final question that I have. Manure is best utilized in a soil fertility program when malic 3 phosphorus is less than what concentration? And that's malic 3 soil test P.
Okay, Peter, we have some answers coming in of 30 part per million, 20 part per million, 50 part per million, several 30 part per millions coming in.
Yep. Okay. Are you seeing the 50 on my slide, Jean?
Yes, now I am.
Okay. So, I would say, certainly, managing at 30 or less is the opportunity to get the greatest value out of that manure. We would expect the greatest response at soil test phosphorus levels less than 30 parts per million. But, certainly that upper threshold, and what I've got here is 50 parts per million. So anything with a soil test P less than 50 parts per million, there's a great opportunity to maximize the value of utilizing manure in your soil fertility program. And so with that, that's what I have to share with everybody today. Again, I am Peter Tomlinson, your state extension specialist for environmental quality, and look forward to hearing questions from the group.
Okay, as we're getting everyone with your questions, go ahead, put them in the Q&A box, put them in the chat box. If you can't get any of those to work, just go ahead and email them to me. We do have one question from James Coover who came in. This came in earlier in the presentation. The inorganic N, what's the ratio of nitrates to ammonia in feedlot manure? Is there a risk of volatilization?
I would have to go back and pull some data. The majority, it's going to depend on the source. I would say off the cuff for feedlot manure that's been in pens for a long period of time, you're probably going to see more of that in the nitrate form. Because you will have had the chance for ammonia volatilization out in the pens. That if we're thinking about something like poultry litter where it's stored in a house in a covered environment, and depending if they're utilizing any ammonia volatilization inhibitors in the management of that litter, we could see a higher fraction of ammonia that could be subject to ammonia volatilization with something like poultry litter. But I don't have a firm number on the ratio of nitrate to ammonia. That's going to depend on the source and the management.
Okay, Peter, we have another question that come in. What are your thoughts about raw manure versus composted manure?
So the question is, what are my thoughts on composted versus raw manure? Composted manure certainly does result in a product that has more uniformity to it. With that, there is the potential for some loss of nitrogen. So you may not get as much nitrogen value out of that compost. But in terms of its spreadability and ease of handling, I think there's an advantage with the composted manure. And certainly, it's going to be a very good source of phosphorus and potassium for your fertility program.
Peter, we got some in the Q&A here. What are your thoughts on raw manure versus compost?
I think that's the same question that Jeannie just asked that I answered. Again, I would say that in terms of the composted, I think you're going to have a more uniform product. The one challenge would be that, you do lose some of the volatile nitrogen component of that manure. And so, you could have a lower nitrogen value that you'd have to add additional nitrogen. But again, the advantage of that composted manure is you're going to gain a product that, is a little easier to handle, more uniformity in how it, comes out of the back of the spreader, because it's going to have been, mixed several times prior to getting delivered to the farm.
All right. And did you answer about the additives like Agritain or Inserve that can be added to reduce risk of volatilization with manure?
Yeah. I have not had the opportunity to do any work that utilizes, one of our nitrogen stabilizer products, in conjunction with manure. When we look at the, inorganic to organic nitrogen in that manure, depending when that manure is going to be applied, if you're applying that, say, December, January, February, I believe Dorvar says I think the window of effectiveness of lot of those nitrogen stabilizer products is somewhere around 2 weeks. So, from that standpoint, you're probably not going to gain a lot of value as far as being able to get that nitrogen carried all the way to when you plant in late March, April. There might be some advantage if you were putting manure on, right ahead of wheat planting, but certainly, there's some opportunities to gain some protection of nitrogen, on the inner, in the commercial nitrogen that you apply to supplement your nitrogen needs if you're utilizing manure. I think that's where you would gain the greater value to your production system to bring a stabilizer product in.
That should catch us up on the Zoom side. I don't know if there's anything on YouTube from Sandra.
Nope, I don't see any questions yet. They're just coming to the questions because they're about 4 slides behind. So, but I'm not seeing any right now.
Quick question, Peter. There was one that came in and I think Craig got answered, but just comment on the weed seed viability. Can you comment on those of raw versus composted manure?
Yeah, I mean, that would be another advantage of utilizing a composted manure, assuming that manure is truly composted and has reached sufficiently high temperatures. I think there would be some opportunities to and certainly the composting literature says that if you're achieving the temperatures needed to truly compost, that weed seed viability is reduced. One of the challenges, and again, this comes to asking questions of who you're purchasing manure from. If it's just being piled and left piled for 6 months, I wouldn't call that composting. There's certainly some composting processes happening, but truly composted manure, there's going to be some balancing of the carbon to nitrogen ratios, potentially bringing in some, additional carbon sources. And there's going to be a lot more management, and that's going to result in that really uniform product with true composting of manure.
Okay, Peter, I don't see any more questions for you on this. If you guys have more questions, please feel free to go ahead and get them put into the Q&A box or into the chat box. We'll have Peter's contact information here. You can always drop him an email and let him know or ask him questions you might have. I know sometimes with the manure side of things can get a little more involved. It's not just a cut and dried answer, it seems like. So if you have more questions for Peter, he's happy to, I think, work with folks on management plans and things along those lines with manure. Peter's nodding his head, yes.
I'm always happy. And, one of the challenges, there's not a lot of funding for manure research. So if you're thinking about, incorporating manure into your soil fertility program, please feel free to reach out to, Lucas Haig or Jeannie or any of the agents. I'm certainly happy in being involved in on-farm research and helping to understand, how manure fits into a fertility program, and how we can best manage manure for Kansas.
Great. With that, Peter, I see one more in the Q&A box. Does Letterdite have a role in amending soils?
Not sure what Letterdite is, so
Well, I'm not sure if I pronounced that right. Leonardite. Looks like Leonard Ite. Okay. So, Pete, Marvin, we might have to get you in contact with Peter directly on that one. Oh, he said it's a soft coal.
I am out of my area of expertise.
Okay, another comment through on our backside of things is that might be a question for another one of our fertility specialists. So Marvin, if you want to email me your question, then we will get that directed to another one of our specialists to see about trying to get that answered for you. So, okay, with that, I think we are concluding with Peter. So thank you, Peter, for hanging with us today. I know you are recovering from being sick and are a little raspy at times, but thanks for working with us for this session of our CropTalk webinar series.
Glad to be here today.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so if anyone else has questions, please send them to me at this email address. I will get them forward on to Peter for what he needs. Let's see, Emily, are you on here for finishing out our sessions here?
I am, yes. So like Jeannie said, if you guys can go ahead and make sure that you get your number and your name sent to her at that email for those credit hours. That's one of the last things we're going to talk about today. And then on our next slide, it'll show you a link and a QR code if you guys would be willing to take a really short survey, an evaluation to help us better help you guys with this series and all of our online technology groups. This will really help us with future programming. If you have any other questions, make sure to reach out to any of your agents. You can email the emails that you get sent with the links. You can email Jeannie, and then join us next week for high fertilizer prices, the perfect time for precision ag, starting at noon again, and it'll be on Monday, February 14th.
All right, thanks everyone. We and put those links for the evaluation into the chat box. And so you guys can follow that link or scan this QR code for the evaluation. Thanks, Emily. She's our extension agent in Thomas County. With that, I think we are done for the day. Please let us know if you have any other questions. Please fill out the evaluation. We really appreciate your feedback. And with that, I think we are done for the day. So thanks for joining us.